Caleb has this theory, and sometimes Jimmy looks at Caleb like, what the H? He didn't have to say it. But Caleb has this theory that I may endorse. The top athletic departments in the nation will end up having the top basketball programs in the nation. Now, here's why I say that, Caleb, and here's why I say that, Jimmy. Caleb's going to pull up the list. I'm having trouble speaking today. It's cold medicine. Sorry, I'm struggling. But I would say that back in the day, Gonzaga could spend, I'm going to throw a number out there, Jimmy, $10 million and build an awesome basketball program, right? Whatever the cost was. I can remember when you and I worked together, it was roughly $10 million is what Tennessee spent on that. Well, Gonzaga, it's probably 10 times that now, but Gonzaga could spend that sort of money and be competitive. They could have the indoor training facility. They could have all of the best support staff. They could have a buffet. They could have a barber shop like Tennessee does. All of that. But here is where I think the rubber's going to meet the road, and the Dukes in North Carolinas aren't going to be the Dukes in North Carolinas 5 years from now. Because I believe that with NIL, you can now spend more money, frivolous money to some extent. And Jimmy, I think that's going to be the differentiating factor. And we're going to pull up the top grossing athletic departments here in a second. But what do you first think of that premise?
And the premise is not just athletic departments. I just want to interrupt real quick. It's football programs. College football programs will be the new basketball blue bloods because they are usually the top athletic departments. Sorry.
So football programs of 4 to 5 will make the basketball programs better. Is that what you're saying? Because of the money? I don't think Duke's going away. So, and I think North Carolina will get back, not because of Belichick. I think they get back once they get a better coach. So I don't think that the basketball programs that are going in Kentucky. So that would imply that Kentucky is going to take a dip, right? In basketball.
All the above.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think those programs will still be really good. And Kentucky's going to put more money into percentage-wise into basketball than they do football. Duke will do the same thing. I don't know about North Carolina yet. So I don't necessarily see that. I think I do think the programs that are really good in football, like Tennessee and Alabama, they're going to continue to do well in men's basketball as long as they get the right coach. But I don't think that because I don't think the money is going to lead to some of the blue bloods in basketball that are not great football programs. I don't think that they will go away. I think they will still be very impactful and will be Elite Eight or Final Four type teams.
Okay. Caleb, this was your assertion. So Jimmy just gave you a very nice, what the H?
Yeah, Jimmy just basically shot down my argument. No, okay, so Jimmy, let me throw this out there. And here's my take on this. Because people are asking why the SEC was so dominant in basketball this year. And my argument was, I think because of the success of the revenue generated by SEC football, they're able to now pour a lot more money into the basketball programs that they weren't able to do before. The biggest example I bring up is, let's just go back 10 years. I mean, the SEC 10 years ago was a joke in basketball. What happened 10 years ago? The SEC network
got in.
I'm sorry?
3 teams got in the NCAA tournament 10 years ago.
Exactly. Three teams. And there's 2 in the Final Four just this year. There were 4 in the Elite Eight and 3 in the tournament 10 years ago. The SEC network started. That was a big revenue driver, particularly on the football end. And I think that allowed them to spend a lot of money elsewhere. Now, the reason I do think Duke might be going away in the near future, because I think, look what just happened to Kansas. They're in the Big 12. They haven't won a championship since the first year. They haven't even gotten past the first weekend since the first year of NIL. And they're blue blood. Duke, they did make the Final Four this year. They got a rare talent in Cooper Flagg. But North Carolina's fallen off. I guess the point I'm getting at is I think the SEC success this year is totally based on how good of football programs they are traditionally, that has been able to generate a lot of revenue for them to be successful in basketball, in which they wouldn't be able to do 10 years ago.
Okay, here, as I'm debating this on the fly, here's why I think the SEC got better in basketball. And I remember this because I was covering all these SEC spring meetings where they were complaining and whining about how bad men's basketball was. So they hired a couple of guys that were basketball experts to help them along the way. One of the things they told them was you need to schedule harder. You can't go out and play a bunch of cupcakes. You need to upgrade your schedule to help you with your RPI at that time, now the net. And I remember talking to Kevin Stallings at Vanderbilt. He said, that's all good and to go out and schedule harder, but if you don't win any of those games, it doesn't do you any good. You got to win some of those games. Here's why I think the SEC got so much better men's basketball. They hired outstanding coaches. And you say, well, what about the players? Those coaches got the players. So I think it's because they did a better job of hiring coaches. Look how many outstanding coaches there are in the SEC. I mean, look at Ole Miss with Chris Beard. Yeah, I think Gates in Missouri is a really good coach. There's some very good coaches in this league. And I think that's that is the main reason. Now, did they get good coaches because they paid them more money? Maybe. Did they get good players recently because of NIL? Yes. I mean, Arkansas and Kentucky remade their entire rosters, right? And they had to do it through the portal, and they had to use NIL money to do that. So I think the main thing is they got great coaches. And now, if you're dumb enough to go out and hire Donnie Tyndall, you're not going anywhere, okay? So you got to be able to identify and make sure you hire good coaches, and that's what they've done. I mean, even Mike White leaves Florida to go to Georgia, where he's done a pretty decent job. He got engulfed at Florida, and then Florida brings in Todd Golden, and here they are in the Final Four. So I think the key was going out and hiring outstanding coaches. And as long as they do that, I think the league is going to be the best in the country.
Caleb, if we can't pull up that list, Jimmy, we're keeping you a little late. I apologize. I'm doped up on drug medicine.
Well, I joined you late.
What's that?
I joined you late.
That was my fault because I didn't get the link to you. All right. So if you can, Caleb, pull up that list that has is it the top football?
These are the top athletic budgets, top 10 athletic budgets in the nation. But we can say up front that football is the driver.
Yeah.
Is the driver.
I don't think there's any school that's going to be on this list that's going to say, boy, that swimming and diving program, really, that's the motor behind our athletic department. All right, so pull up that list, and I'm going to take a look at them.
All right, so number 1 is Ohio State.
Are you going to share the screen?
Oh, I apologize. Sorry. And this is at the end of 2024. So because they don't have the data for this year. So through 2024, this is what we're looking at right here, guys. I wish I could zoom in a little more. I'm having trouble. I apologize. But
I don't know that I can read that. Well, maybe we should go back to you just reading it off.
Here we go. Here we go. Is that better?
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So you've got Ohio State, Texas, Alabama, Michigan, Georgia, LSU, Texas A&M, Florida, Penn State, Oklahoma. Those are your top 10. Roughly by my count, 8 of those made the NCAA tournament. 1 Florida. I know they struggled the other night, but I've got them winning it all. Texas makes it. Arguably, they shouldn't have. Alabama is one of the better teams in the nation. I got to be honest with you. I think Caleb's onto something. Just scroll down real quickly. I'm not going to read them all, but Caleb, scroll down and find the first basketball school. And even Michigan State's not a I guess Indiana, who just, by the way, had a pretty good run.
Missed the NCAA tournament.
Yes, missed the NCAA tournament, but you consider a basketball school, and just just had a pretty good football season as well.
Same with Virginia. Basketball school has a losing record.
Yeah. I think some of this rings true to me, Jimmy, in that, and you can drop that down. I think you're going to see more and more of those football powers be up at the top. And my issue, not necessarily with Duke or North Carolina, but let's take because they're going to find money that's there if they need more in NIL. But when you go from spending X amount to X times 3 because of NIL, can Gonzaga hang? Can McNeese State hang? I mean, those
are McNeese State, no.
right.
Okay,
I mean, but those are programs that with a good coach and a sudden influx of talent, as Will Wade did, they could compete for the Final Four. I just don't know that those programs are going to be there anymore.
Well, and I'm going to scratch McNeese State as competing for Final Four. No.
Okay. Sweet 16. Sweet 16.
Gonzaga, yes.
Okay.
I'll give you Gonzaga because they've
Or
been
like in Memphis too.
Yeah, Memphis as well with Penny Hardaway. I do think that you're talking about programs that will invest. And look, and you know this, and in basketball, you don't have to have a roster of 8 5-star players.
Right.
You don't. You get a couple of the right guys. I mean, would Duke be good without Cooper Flagg? Yes, they are. But now they're national championship caliber. Excuse me while I get rid of this phone call. Sorry. So in basketball, and look, and here's my point about Duke. Next year, they're bringing in Carlos Boozer's twin sons. They're going to be great again next year. They've got 5 freshmen on this team this year, and they may win the national championship. So I think those programs are continued to do well. And Gonzaga doesn't have to compete against football for NIL money, so they can pour it into their basketball program. And again, you don't have to have – you get 2 or 3 of the right guys, and you can be pretty darn good in basketball. So I still think that there's room for the Dukes, North Carolinas, Gonzagas of the world to continue to be Sweet 16 or Elite 8 type programs. I think there's room for that.
Hold on. Hold that thought, Caleb. What the H brought to you by Double D Piping, then it's all yours.
Double D Piping provides full-service fire protection on any scale. From residential homes to government facilities, we can assist any customer through design, fabrication, installation, inspection, and demonstration of fire suppression systems. With 30 years of service across 5 states and a full staff with over 40 years experience, our quality can't be beaten. Don't get caught watching what you could have prevented. Call Double D Piping, the absolute best.
All right, Caleb.
Jimmy, what do you make of my theory on this? You talked about the great coaches in the SEC, and I do think part of that is the football allowing them to pay more. But another theory I have is, do you think one of the reasons they're so good in basketball is, unlike SEC football programs, they haven't made perfect the enemy of good when hiring coaches in basketball? So my argument is that a Tennessee football program would have never hired a Rick Barnes who just got fired by Texas and was 62 years old. But they were willing to settle on a Rick Barnes in basketball because they're like, okay, he may not win us a national championship, but he's going to be very good. He'll put people in the seats, he'll recruit, and we'll always be contenders. Do you think that's something that has led to the SEC being so successful with their coaches in basketball?
The willingness to hire somebody like Rick Barnes?
Yes.
Been fired by a program?
Yes.
Yes. Mike White was in trouble at Florida before he went to Georgia. So there's another example of somebody that they hired. There are not many people that wanted to touch Chris Beard based on how he got fired at Texas, and yet the SEC did. So, yes, to that point, I agree with that. And those are examples of coaches. I mean, you could argue Rick Barnes is the best men's basketball coach Tennessee's ever had. You can argue that Beard's done a great job at Ole Miss, and that and White has made Georgia more relevant than it was before he got there. So, yeah, I think that's a good point. It's a fair point. And here's the thing too. I think the SEC will continue to be outstanding in men's basketball because of those coaches. And I don't see a lot of those coaches using their SEC job as a stepping stone to go somewhere else.
Here's the other thing too, and Jimmy, I'm going to leave you with this. Give us a poll question real quick. Where do we stand on that?
Who should be paid more, Josh Heupel or Deion Sanders? Oh wow, 96% say Josh Heupel.
Yeah, we know our audience, Jimmy. I will say this. The other factor, and I want to let you out of here, the other factor that can't be understated is, what are ADs now? They're CEOs, they're former businessmen. Back when Doug Dickey was hiring basketball coaches, I still remember him coming up to me on practice one time and go, all this water, all you need are some salt towels to suck on. I'm like, whoa. I mean, that may be a man who's past his prime in terms of running an athletic department.
Maybe he was talking to you, not the players.
Yeah, because he's like, Dave, you just don't suck.
You typed the wrong message there.
I hope you get dehydrated, have a heart attack, and die.
And I'm going to say this. I do think Doug Dickey wanted to win in basketball. I differ from people. I just don't think he was very good at hiring coaches. That was it. And he hired a guy named Pat Kennedy, and Kennedy backed out. Then he ended up with Houston. He hired Kevin O'Neill. That ended up being a disaster. But I don't think he had this, well, we got to keep men's basketball down at this level. We don't want to win. No, I don't believe that. I know it appeared that way because he couldn't hire a good basketball coach. But I do know there were some really good basketball coaches, Kevin Stallings included, that did not want to work for a football AD. You also heard Rick Barnes make the comment that he didn't think Tennessee took basketball seriously when Dickey was there. They went after Roy Williams at Kansas. They interviewed him for the job one time. I think he tried. I just don't think he was successful at hiring good basketball coaches.
They were in good shape with Kevin Stallings until they took a phone call from Jerry Green in Kevin Stallings' house, and then they were asked to leave.
Well, and I asked Stallings directly about that. He said he said, I didn't want to work for Doug Dickey. He said that phone call is not the reason. I didn't want to work for a football AD. Stallings told me that himself. So
that was a not so proud moment for the News Sentinel, and I've been a part of those because if you remember, we were in Kevin Stallings' picture up that he was the next coach. Do you remember that?
Yeah, and I would have advised differently on that one.
You're also talking to the person who wrote, there is no way that Lane Kiffin would leave for Southern Cal because they have so many other options. And it was such a weak story. They ran it on the inside, thank God, because I didn't want it out front saying that there's no way he'll leave for Southern Cal. That was the day he left.
Well, and I got a tip on that on a Friday because about 5 people had turned it down.
Right. My tip was it scrolling across the screen right as I opened my Friday afternoon beer. And I was like, okay, we'll put that back up. And they're all running down. Did you cover that whole crazy thing? Were you down there?
Yeah. Was I down? Well, yeah, I was at the press conference. Yeah.
Yeah, I went outside to deal with the players, which both were very fun.